The last thing Mom said before she died was that she hated you. My daughter said it without raising her voice. That was what made it hurt. We were standing in the back room of my old house, surrounded by boxes I had not opened in years. Dust floated through the late afternoon sunlight coming through the blinds. On the floor between us was a cardboard box filled with photographs, old tax papers, Christmas cards, and things I had spent 15 years convincing myself I no longer needed. My daughter, Emily, was 32. I was 61. And for 15 years, I had believed that my wife had gone to her grave hating me. I had carried that belief so long that in some strange way, it had become part of who I was. I never expected to hear Emily say it again, especially not while standing inside the house where her mother had taken her last breath. "I don't understand," I said. Emily crossed her arms. "You understood 15 years ago." "No," I replied. "I was told what she said. That's different." Emily looked away. For a second, I thought she might take it back. She didn't. "She told me everything, Dad." I looked at the old box between us. "Everything?" "She said you chose your work over her. She said you stopped loving her. She said she didn't want to see you before she died." I swallowed. "And you believed her?" Emily finally looked at me. "She was my mother." That sentence ended the conversation. At least for that night. But it started something else. Because 3 weeks later, while cleaning out that same house after deciding to sell it, I found an envelope hidden beneath a loose floorboard. My wife's handwriting was on the front. My name was written across it, and underneath my name were 6 words that made my hand start shaking. Please let him read this someday. 15 years earlier, I had buried my wife, believing she died hating me. I was about to find out that almost everything I believed about those final months had been wrong. You're watching Father's Hidden Reckoning, where we tell stories about betrayal, family, consequences, and the moments when people finally discover what they're worth. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from today. This story contains fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. Any similarities to real people or events are coincidental. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because the truth didn't start with that envelope. It started long before it. My wife's name was Laura. We had been married for 27 years. When people asked me what our marriage was like, I never knew how to give them a simple answer. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We met when we were both 26. I was working as a project manager for a regional construction company in Ohio. Laura worked in the administrative office of a medical equipment supplier. She had a habit of tapping her pen against her bottom lip whenever she was thinking. I noticed it the first day I met her. She noticed a coffee stain on my shirt. Neither of us ever admitted who fell first. Laura said it was me because I invited her to dinner. I said it was her because she accepted. That was how we were. We argued about ridiculous things and agreed on important ones. We bought our first house when Emily was 3. It wasn't a beautiful house. The kitchen was too small, the upstairs bathroom had terrible water pressure, and the back porch leaned slightly to one side. But Laura loved that porch. Every spring, she planted the same white flowers along the railing. Every autumn, she wrapped herself in an old gray sweater and sat there with a cup of tea while Emily did her homework beside her. I still have that sweater. I never threw it away. Some things are easier to keep than to lose. For most of our marriage, I believed I knew Laura better than anyone. That was my first mistake. Not because I didn't know her, because I thought knowing someone for 27 years meant there could be no secrets left. When Laura became sick, I was 46. Emily was 17. At first, the doctors told us it was treatable. That phrase stayed with me. Treatable. It sounded like a promise. Laura underwent treatment after treatment, and I became obsessed with making sure she never had to think about money. I worked more hours. I accepted assignments I normally would have turned down. I traveled. At the time, I thought I was protecting my family. Laura saw something different. Distance. There were nights when I came home after Emily had gone to sleep. There were mornings when Laura was already awake before I left. Sometimes we sat across from each other at the kitchen table and barely spoke. I remember one night particularly well. It was raining hard. Laura was sitting near the window. I walked in after midnight. She looked at the clock. "You're late." "I know." "Did you eat?" "No." She nodded and returned her attention to the rain. I took off my coat. "You should go to bed." "I will." I hesitated. "You okay?" She smiled. That smile should have warned me. "I'm fine, Daniel." She always called me Daniel when she wanted me to know she was upset. Everyone else called me Dan. I sat across from her. "I can cut back on work." "You say that every week." "I mean it." She looked at me. "I know you mean it." That was worse. I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. But there was a distance between us that I couldn't cross. Back then, I blamed the illness. I told myself she was exhausted, scared, angry at what was happening to her body. Anything except the possibility that she was becoming unhappy with me. The following spring, I received a promotion. It came with more money and more travel. I remember walking into the house, holding the paperwork, like a teenager carrying a report card. I got it. Laura was washing dishes. She turned around. "Got what?" "The regional position." She smiled. "That's wonderful." I kissed her forehead. "It'll make things easier." Laura's smile faded slightly. "What things?" "Our future." She stared at me. "Dan, what if I don't have one?" I thought she was talking about her illness. So I said the worst possible thing. "Don't talk like that. I'm being realistic. You're giving up." "No." She dried her hands. "I'm trying to tell you something." "What?" She looked directly at me. "I don't want you to spend whatever time I have left building a life you won't be around to live." I didn't answer, because there was no answer I liked. Within 2 months, I was traveling almost every week. Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh. I told myself it was temporary. Everything was temporary. The treatment, the travel, the exhaustion, the fear. Then one evening, Emily called me while I was in a hotel in Detroit. "Dad?" Her voice was strange. "What happened?" "Mom's having a bad day." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Did she take her medication?" "Yes." "Did she call the doctor?" "Yes." There was a pause. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "She asked me if you're still coming home Friday." "I'll be home Friday night." "She wants you home earlier." I rubbed my forehead. I'll try. Emily went quiet. Then she said something I never forgot. You always say that. The next morning, I changed my flight. I came home Thursday afternoon. Laura was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and watched her breathe. She looked smaller. That was the first time I realized how much weight she had lost. He said, "Basil here." Her eyes opened. "You're home." "Yeah." "You look tired." "So do you." She smiled. Smart answer. I laughed. She reached for my hand. I held it. Then she said something that I understood completely differently. 15 years later. "Promise me you won't let Emily believe everything that happens to us is her fault." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing." "Laura." She squeezed my fingers. "Just promise me." "I promise." She closed her eyes. I kissed her hand. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. 2 months later, Laura asked for a separation. I remember standing in the kitchen staring at her. "A separation?" She nodded. "Just for a while." "Why?" "I need space." "From me?" "Yes." The word landed harder than it should have. "Laura, I'm doing everything I can." "I know." "Then what is this?" She looked exhausted. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling guilty because you sacrificed yours." "You think I'm sacrificing my life?" "Sometimes." I stepped back. "So what do you want me to do?" "Live." "I am living." "No," she said quietly. "You're managing." I didn't know how to answer that. She walked away. That night, I slept in the guest room. Emily knew something was wrong. She stood outside the door. "Dad?" "Come in." She sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you guys fighting?" "No." She looked at me. "Dad." I smiled weakly. "We're just dealing with some things." "What things?" "Adult things." She shook her head. "That means you're not telling me." I didn't realize then how much she would later fill in the blanks herself. Over the next few months, Laura became increasingly private. She made phone calls from the backyard. She locked her desk drawer. She started keeping a small black notebook inside her purse. I noticed everything. I understood nothing. Then one afternoon, I found her crying in the laundry room. I stopped. "Laura?" She wiped her face. "It's nothing." "It doesn't look like nothing." She turned away. I said I'm fine. I didn't push. I wish I had. That week, something happened that changed everything. I came home early from work and found Emily sitting at the kitchen table. She was crying. "What happened?" She stood up. "Mom says you're leaving us." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She said you're going away." "Emily, that's not true." "She said you have someone else." I stared at her. "Who told you that?" "Mom." I felt something cold move through my chest. "Did she say that?" Emily nodded. I walked toward the bedroom. Laura was sitting on the edge of the bed. "Why would you tell Emily I have someone else?" Laura looked at me. "I didn't." "Emily says you did." Laura covered her face with both hands. "I can't do this." "Do what?" This. She gestured between us. I can't keep explaining myself. What are you hiding? Her hands dropped. Nothing. That isn't an answer. I need you to leave me alone. I looked at her for a long time. Then I walked out. That night, I slept in a motel. The next morning, Laura called. Come home. So I did. But something between us had changed. Neither of us knew how to repair it. A month later, she was hospitalized. Her condition had worsened. The doctors became more careful with their language. I heard phrases like response to treatment and quality of life. I stopped working. I stayed at the hospital. Emily stayed too. For several days, the three of us were together again. It should have been comforting. Instead, there was tension in every room. One evening, Laura asked me to leave. Why? I want to talk to Emily. About what? Just leave. I looked at Emily. She avoided my eyes. I walked into the hallway. That was the last time I heard my wife's voice directly. 2 days later, Laura died. I was not in the room. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria because Emily had insisted I eat something. When I returned, the room was quiet. Too quiet. Emily stood beside the window. She was holding her mother's hand. I knew before she turned around. My wife was gone. I don't remember the funeral clearly. There are moments that remain. The flowers, the rain, the smell of wet coats, Emily standing beside the casket, and the sentence she said to me after everyone else had left. Mom died believing you never loved her. I had no defense, no answer. I had spent years trying to provide for her. But at the end, perhaps all Laura wanted was for me to be there. I blamed myself. Then 3 months after her death, Emily told me the sentence that would shape the next 15 years. She died hating you. I stared at my daughter. Did she say that? Emily nodded. She told me. I asked her to show me anything Laura had written. Emily shook her head. She didn't leave anything for you. That was the beginning of our distance. Not a dramatic break. There was no slammed door. No screaming. Just absence. Emily moved to another state for college. We spoke occasionally. Birthdays. Christmas. Short phone calls. Polite conversations. She never brought her mother up. Neither did I. I accepted her version of the truth because I had no evidence to challenge it. 15 years passed. Then Emily called me one Sunday morning. Dad? Yeah? I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. What is it? She said she was coming home. She wouldn't tell me why. 3 days later, she arrived at the old house. She stood in the doorway holding a paper grocery bag filled with things that had belonged to Laura. I found these in storage. I let her in. We spent the afternoon sorting through boxes. That was when I repeated the question I had asked years earlier. Did your mother really say she hated me? Emily didn't answer. I looked at her. Emily. She sat down. I don't know anymore. Those 4 words frightened me more than anything she had said before. What changed? She rubbed her hands together. I found something too. What? A receipt. For what? A storage unit. I frowned. Your mother rented one? Emily nodded. But it was in someone else's name. Whose? She looked at me. Your brother's. I felt my chest tighten. My younger brother, Michael, had died 8 years earlier. I hadn't spoken to him much during the final years of his life. There had been a disagreement over money. Nothing that couldn't have been fixed. Nothing we ever fix. Why would Mom use Uncle Michael's name? I don't know. I stared at the boxes. What was in the unit? Emily shook her head. It's gone. What do you mean, gone? The storage company says it was emptied 11 years ago. I sat back. By who? They wouldn't tell me. Why? Because the account was closed. There was something about the way she said it that told me she knew more. You're hiding something. Emily looked down. I found a photograph. She pulled one from the grocery bag. It showed Laura standing beside a man I didn't recognize. I stared at the picture. Who is that? I don't know. When I turned the photograph over, there was handwriting on the back. A date. A location. And 3 words. He knows everything. I looked at Emily. Who is he? I don't know. Where did you find this? In your mother's desk. I stood up. Give me the rest. She hesitated. There isn't much. Emily. She handed me a small bundle of papers. Among them was a bank receipt, 2 medical invoices, an old appointment card, and a handwritten note. I unfolded it. There were only 2 lines. Dan, please don't believe what they tell you. The note wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. Laura. My hands began to shake. Emily saw my face. What? I looked at her. Your mother wrote this. I know. Why didn't you show me? I didn't find it until yesterday. I looked back at the note. Who are they? Emily shook her head. I don't know. For the first time in 15 years, the story I had buried began to crack. Not break. Crack. And once something like that starts, you don't get to choose what falls through. That night, Emily stayed at the house. I barely slept. At 4 a.m, I went downstairs and opened the old desk. Laura's desk. The drawer still smelled faintly of cedar. Inside were pens, paper clips, receipts, a dead calculator, and an empty black notebook cover. I remembered the notebook, the one she used to carry everywhere. I had not seen it since before she died. I searched the desk again. Nothing. Then I remembered something. During the final months of Laura's illness, she had asked me to repair the loose floorboard near the bookshelf. I'd forgotten about it. I moved the shelf. The board was still loose. I knelt down and lifted it. There was a small space underneath. Empty. Except for one thing. A brass key. I held it beneath the kitchen light. There was a number stamped into it. I had no idea what it opened. Until Emily walked into the room. She looked at the key. Then her face changed. Dad. What? I've seen that before. Where? In Mom's jewelry box. Where is it? She swallowed. I gave it away. To whom? She didn't answer. Emily. She looked at me. To Michael. My brother, dead for 8 years. I stared at the key. Then at my daughter. Why would you give your mother's key to my brother? Emily's face went pale. Because Mom told me to. The room seemed to become very small. What exactly did she tell you? Emily sat down. She made me promise not to tell you. When? The day before she died. I felt the blood drain from my face. She spoke to you? Yes. And what did she say? Emily began to cry. I thought she hated you. That's what you told me. I know. Then why are you crying? She wiped her face. Because I don't think she did. Neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed in the background. A car passed outside. For 15 years, I had imagined my wife's final words. I had imagined contempt, disappointment, anger. Now, for the first time, another possibility entered the room. Fear. I looked at the key in my palm. Where does number 217 go? Emily shook her head. I don't know. But I did. Not because I remembered the key. Because I remembered something else. A storage facility outside town. One I had never used. One Laura had mentioned exactly once. 15 years ago. And suddenly, a conversation I had forgotten came back to me. Laura had been standing in the kitchen. She was holding the black notebook. She had looked at me and said, "Someday you'll understand why I couldn't tell you." At the time, I thought she was talking about dying. Now, I wasn't so sure. I called the storage facility the next morning. The woman who answered said the facility had changed ownership twice. I gave her the unit number. 217. There was a pause. Sir, that unit doesn't belong to anyone anymore. I understand. No, you don't. The unit was closed years ago. Who closed it? She typed something. I can't give you personal information. I'm her husband. Another pause. Your name? Daniel Mercer. I heard the keyboard stop. Then the woman said something that made my stomach tighten. Mr. Mercer, the file has a note. What note? She was told to contact you if you ever came here. I froze. What? The instruction was added years ago. By whom? I don't know. What does it say? The woman hesitated, then read it. Do not release anything unless Daniel Mercer presents proof of identity. I sat completely still. Do you still have the contents? No. My heart sank. Then what's left? Mr. Mercer. Yes? There is one envelope. My grip tightened around the phone. What's inside? I don't know. Can you open it? No. Why not? Because it has your name on it. I closed my eyes. After 15 years, my wife's voice seemed to be waiting for me somewhere I had never thought to look. I asked the woman to hold the envelope. Then I drove there with Emily. We didn't speak much on the way. When we arrived, the manager brought out a small metal lockbox. She placed it on the counter. There was an envelope inside. My name was written across it. Not Daniel. Not Dan. Just my husband. The handwriting was Laura's. I touched the envelope with 2 fingers. Emily stood beside me. Open it, she whispered. I looked at my daughter. For 15 years, you told me your mother died hating me. Emily nodded. I know. And now we're standing here with a letter she apparently intended for me. She looked at the envelope. I was wrong. I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to be angry. Instead, I felt something worse. I was afraid because after 15 years of grieving a woman who supposedly hated me, I suddenly had the possibility of learning that she had been trying to tell me something. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. I unfolded it. The first line read, Daniel, if you're reading this, then Emily finally found the courage to tell you. I stopped breathing for a moment. I looked at Emily. She was staring at the floor. I continued. The next line was shorter. I never hated you. My vision blurred. I read it again. Then again. And beneath those words was the sentence that changed everything I thought I knew about my wife's death. I lied to Emily because I needed her to believe I was angry with you. I looked up. Emily was crying. And then I read the final paragraph. There is someone close to us who has been using my illness to control what happens after I'm gone. I discovered what he did, but I was too sick to stop him myself. I need you to understand one thing before you confront him. He believes you never saw the account statement. He believes the original agreement is destroyed. He believes Emily knows nothing. I stopped. The room was silent. I read the last line. Let him keep believing that until you find the green folder. My hands went cold because I knew exactly what the green folder was. And I also knew where I had seen it last. My wife's desk. The desk sitting inside my house. The desk I had searched that morning. The desk that had been in front of me for 15 years. But there was one problem. The green folder wasn't there. And when I told Emily that, she looked at me with a fear I had never seen in her before. Dad. What? I think I know where it is. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph of my brother's old office. On the desk, behind a framed picture, was a green folder. Exactly where Laura had told me to look. Emily turned the photograph over. There was another handwritten message on the back. This one was only 5 words long. Don't trust the man beside you. I looked at Emily, then toward the door. And suddenly, I remembered who had been standing beside me when Laura was dying. Who had told me to leave the hospital room. Who had insisted there was no reason to worry. And who had been the first person to tell me Laura was angry with me. My brother, Michael. Except Michael had been dead for 8 years. And someone had been using his name long after his death. I looked at the photograph again. My brother's office. The green folder. The message? And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. Michael had always been good with paperwork. Too good. When Laura became sick, he offered to help me understand some of the insurance and investment documents. At the time, I had been grateful. I was working. Laura was undergoing treatment. Emily was finishing high school. There were hospital bills everywhere. Michael told me he could organize things. I trusted him. That was the second mistake I had made. Emily and I drove to Michael's old office that afternoon. The building had been sold 2 years earlier, but the new owner had kept the old storage cabinets in a back room. We explained what we were looking for. The owner let us search. It took nearly an hour. Then Emily shouted from the hallway, "Dad." I turned. She was standing beside an old filing cabinet. There was a green folder in her hands. My name was written on it. But when she opened it, the first document wasn't mine. It was Laura's. I recognized her signature immediately. At the top of the page was a date. 3 months before she died. Below it was an agreement I had never seen. It showed that a portion of our joint investments had been moved into a separate trust. Laura had created it. The beneficiary was Emily. My name wasn't on it. I looked at the signature. It was real, but something didn't make sense. Why would Laura do this? Emily turned another page. Then another. And finally, we found it. A bank statement. Money had been transferred out of the trust. Not by Laura. By Michael. My brother had been withdrawing small amounts over several years. Thousands at a time. Never enough to trigger immediate suspicion. But together, the amount was enormous. I sat down. He stole from her. Emily shook her head. Not exactly. What do you mean? She pointed toward the bottom of the document. There was a power of attorney authorization. The signature looked like mine. I stared at it. I never signed this. Emily looked at me. I know. That was when the real truth started coming together. Michael had forged my signature. He had used the power of attorney to access accounts. And when Laura discovered it, he convinced her that exposing him would destroy the family. But that wasn't the worst part. There was another document, a letter from Laura to an attorney. She had written that she suspected someone close to the family had been manipulating financial records. She specifically mentioned Michael. Then she wrote something that broke my heart. I don't want Daniel to know yet because he will confront him before we have proof. She had been protecting me. I had spent 15 years thinking she didn't trust me. The truth was that she had trusted me enough to know exactly how I would react. She knew I would go after my brother. She also knew I could lose everything before I had the evidence to protect myself. Emily was crying quietly. I knew there was something wrong, she whispered. I looked at her. You were 17. I know. You shouldn't have had to carry this. She wiped her face. Mom made me promise. What did she make you promise? Emily hesitated. She said if she didn't survive, I had to make you believe she hated you. I stared at her. Why? Because Michael was watching. The room went silent. Emily continued. Mom thought he'd come after you if he knew you were investigating him. She wanted you to stay away from him. I shook my head slowly. So the things you told me, I lied. She looked at me. For 15 years. I didn't answer. She lowered her eyes. I was scared. I finally understood. Emily hadn't betrayed me because she didn't love me. She had betrayed the truth because she was a 17-year-old girl trying to carry out the final request of a dying mother. That didn't make the lie harmless, but it changed what it meant. I looked back at the documents. There was one name I hadn't noticed before. A lawyer. Thomas Reed. Laura had apparently contacted him 2 weeks before she died. I searched his name. He was still practicing. His office was 40 minutes away. The next morning, Emily and I went to see him. When I introduced myself, his expression changed. "You're Daniel." I nodded. He closed the office door. "I wondered when you'd come." Those words made my stomach tighten. "You knew about this?" Thomas sat down. "Your wife asked me to hold documents for you. Why didn't you contact me?" "Because she gave me very specific instructions." "What instructions?" He pulled a file from a locked drawer. "She told me not to contact you unless someone showed me the letter you just found." I handed it to him. He read it. Then he nodded. "Okay." He placed a thick folder on the table. "She wanted me to give you this." Inside were copies of bank records, emails, medical bills, legal forms, and one recorded statement. Laura had apparently made it in the attorney's office. Thomas pressed play. For a moment, there was only static. Then I heard her voice. Weak, tired, but unmistakably hers. "If Daniel is hearing this, then I'm gone." I closed my eyes. Laura continued. "Daniel, I am sorry." I opened my eyes. She paused. "I never hated you." My throat tightened. I was angry sometimes, I was lonely sometimes, and I hated the circumstances we were living through. But I never hated you. I looked at Emily. She was crying. Laura's voice continued. "Please don't spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for not being enough. You were trying to save us. You just didn't understand that some things can't be fixed with money, work, or sacrifice." I lowered my head. Then she said something I would remember for the rest of my life. "I loved you. I still do." The recording ended. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Thomas looked at me. "There's more." He opened another folder. "Your wife discovered that Michael had been taking money. She intended to report him." "Why didn't she?" "Because he threatened Emily." My entire body went still. "What did he threaten?" "He told Laura that if she exposed him, he would make sure Emily's future was destroyed." I clenched my jaw. "How?" "He had information about a serious mistake Emily had made as a teenager. Nothing criminal, but something she was terrified would ruin her college application." I looked at Emily. She stared at the floor. "Mom protected me." Thomas nodded. "She chose to let people think you were a terrible husband rather than risk your daughter being targeted." I felt something break inside me. For 15 years, I had believed my wife died hating me. The woman I thought had rejected me had actually spent her final months protecting me and our daughter. And I hadn't known. Not until she was gone. There was still one question. What happened to Michael's fraud? Thomas looked at me. The evidence wasn't enough at the time. Why? Because the accounts were structured carefully. So he got away with it? Thomas nodded. At least then. I looked at the documents again. Then why did you keep all this? Because Laura asked me to. For 15 years? She believed the truth might become important later. I almost laughed. Later? Thomas looked directly at me. She knew time had a way of exposing people. That sentence stayed with me. Michael had died 8 years earlier. His estate had gone to his wife and son. The property he'd owned had recently been sold. Thomas explained that although Michael was dead, the financial records could still matter in civil proceedings. There was no dramatic courtroom battle, No movie-style arrest. No perfect revenge. There was simply a long process of accountants, lawyers, records, and uncomfortable conversations with people who had once believed my family's story. The truth came out slowly. Michael had been using borrowed identities, falsified signatures, and old authorizations to move money. He had convinced Laura that confronting him immediately would put Emily at risk. He had convinced me that Laura was angry with me. He had even encouraged other relatives to believe our marriage was collapsing. The cruelest part was how simple it had been. He didn't need to destroy us. He only needed us to misunderstand each other. By the time everything was documented, much of the money was gone. But enough remained in Michael's estate to recover a significant portion. We eventually reached a settlement. The money mattered, but not nearly as much as the truth. The hardest conversation came afterward. Emily and I sat on the back porch, the same porch where her mother had planted those white flowers. Only now I was 61. Emily was 32. The chairs had been replaced. The railing had been repaired. But the smell of rain was exactly the same. Emily looked at me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I stared across the yard. I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet. She nodded. I understand. I looked at her. But I do know one thing. What? Your mother didn't want us to spend the rest of our lives apart. Emily began to cry. I know. And I'm not going to let the lies she used to protect us become the thing that destroys us. She reached across the table. I took her hand. For the first time in 15 years, it felt like I was holding my daughter's hand instead of reaching for someone who wasn't there. A few weeks later, I went through Laura's things again. This time, I wasn't searching for evidence. I was searching for her. I found her old gray sweater, her coffee mug, a grocery list written in her handwriting, a birthday card she had started for me and never finished. And inside the pocket of the sweater, I found a tiny folded piece of paper. I almost threw it away. Then I unfolded it. It was a list. Nothing important. Milk, bread, flowers. Call Daniel. I stared at those last two words for a long time. Call Daniel. Not I hate Daniel. Not tell Daniel I'm sorry. Just call Daniel. I sat on the bedroom floor and cried for the first time since her funeral. Not because I was angry, because I finally understood. She had been trying to call me, and I had spent 15 years believing she wanted me gone. I kept the note. I kept the letter too. I put them both inside the top drawer of my nightstand. Not because I wanted to live in the past. Because sometimes remembering the truth is a way of finally leaving the past behind. Emily stayed closer after that. Not every day. Not every week. But enough. We started having dinner together. Sometimes we talked about Laura. Sometimes we didn't. And slowly, the silence between us became something different. It stopped being punishment. It became peace. One spring morning, Emily came over carrying a small box. She placed it on the porch. What's that? She smiled. Mom's seeds. I opened the box. Inside were little packets of flower seeds. White flowers. The same ones Laura used to plant every year. Emily looked at me. She would have wanted them here. So we planted them together. Not perfectly. We argued about where to put them. She wanted them closer to the railing. I wanted them beside the steps. She won. She usually did. A few months later, the flowers bloomed. I sat on the porch one evening with Laura's old gray sweater across my lap. The sun was going down. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't wondering whether my wife had died hating me. I knew the truth. She hadn't. She had loved me. She had been frightened. She had made difficult choices. She had protected our daughter in the only way she believed she could. And she had left behind a path for me to find the truth. When I was finally ready, I've thought a lot about what revenge means since then. For years, I believed revenge meant proving someone wrong, making them regret what they had done, taking something from them. But I've changed my mind. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's lie define the rest of your life. Michael took years from me. He took money. He damaged relationships. But he didn't get the final word. Laura did. And so did Emily. Because the truth eventually found its way home. That night, before I went inside, I looked at the flowers along the railing. Exactly where Laura used to plant them. I remembered something she once told me. She said, "Some things only grow after you stop digging them up." For years, I had dug through the past, because I thought the past owed me an explanation. It didn't. It owed me nothing. But my wife had left me one anyway. A letter. A confession. A warning. And more importantly, a reminder that love isn't always loud. Sometimes love looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a sacrifice nobody understands. Sometimes it looks like a 17-year-old daughter carrying a secret she never should have been asked to carry. And sometimes, 15 years later, it looks like an old envelope with your name on it. I don't know what Laura would think of the man I became. I hope she'd recognize him. I'm no longer the man who believes working harder can fix every problem. I'm no longer the man who confuses providing with being present. And I'm certainly no longer the man who thinks silence means someone doesn't care. I've learned that family isn't about never hurting each other. It's about what you choose to do after the hurt. You can walk away. You can stay angry. You can spend decades proving who was right. Or you can finally ask the question that matters. What would the person you lost have wanted you to do with the time you still have? For me, the answer was simple. Love my daughter. Tell the truth. And stop carrying a guilt that was never mine. Before I close this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever believed something about someone you loved, only to discover years later that the truth was completely different? How did it change the way you saw them? Share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the person who appears to be your enemy is not the one you should fear. Sometimes the greatest damage comes from a lie that keeps two people who love each other from ever having an honest conversation. Thank you for spending this time with me on Father's Hidden Reckoning. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who may need the reminder that truth can take years to arrive, but it can still arrive. And subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, consequences, redemption, and the moments when people finally find the courage to face what was hidden. Because sometimes the reckoning isn't about destroying someone else. Sometimes it's about finally finding your way back home.